You ready? Okay. Good morning. Y'all bow with me. Gracious Heavenly Father, again we come asking you to forgive us of our sins, to say thank you. Thank you for everything, particularly for being with us. Keep your hand on us, lead us and guide us. Let us do things that please you. Forgive us when we don't. Thank you for the blessings of family and all that it is. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I just making sure your partner there beside you was here. He made a promise yesterday, and I was making sure he was promising. No, you're not here early. Apparently we can't get here, people, on the right time. Okay. Mr. Battles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I have a little, as Howard Maxwell always said, this is just a little simple retirement bill. And this is very simple. It is under modified structure. It is House Bill 398. What this was, or is, there is a peace officer with each one of our agencies, and for some reason, the Dental Association has a peace officer that investigates incidents that happen within their purview of the association. So they are asking that he be allowed to be a part of the peace officer's annuity retirement, and the Georgia Dental Association is going to pick up all the costs for having him to be a part of this retirement plan. And that's just simply, there's no cost to us. They'll pick all the funds up, all the cost up. Have any questions?
No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, bring before you today HB 571. This is dealing with the Magistrates Retirement Fund. This is a revenue neutral bill. It's at the top of your page, an open rule. It's no cost to the state, revenue neutral. All we're doing is bringing this retirement fund up to the same status as our other retirement funds in collection of dues, providing some options for the judges. Currently they only have one option, and that's all we're doing. And I'd appreciate your support.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Watson, currently, our magistrates, is it voluntary or is it mandatory that they participate in this retirement?
Currently it's voluntary. There's no requirement that they have to pay the dues, and we're just saying that if you become 90 days behind, that you'll be dropped, and you have 30 days to renew and start paying your dues.
Just one comment. I want y'all to be aware of, there is no upfront cost, but after that, it's the ongoing cost of providing a retirement plan for any employee, not just this one or these, but so there's always going to be a cost. It's just no upfront cost. And when we do these actuarial studies, that's what that shows. It shows you don't have cost. What's it gonna cost for us to get into this? It's nothing. But you will have participation from then on, not only on the employee's part, but on the state's part. And then when you get to a certain time in your life and you quit, that money had best be there to provide that. Y'all just keep that in mind, because we talk a lot about no cost. Well, it's no cost today, but it is a cost sooner or later. Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Mr. Earhart.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 658, this is a general statute. However, it only applies to Cobb County. If you look at section 5.1, it's specifically done only to apply when you do hotel motel tax. You have to go into the general statute. All this does is remove the sunset. As you know, bonds are generally 15 and 20 years. If you're going to renovate or expand or refinance, you need that, and the sunset is now out at 9 years, will be 10, so it's not in a good place for them if they want to do that, so we're asking to remove the sunset.
Any questions, Mr. Earhart? No questions. Mr. Harrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under Structured Rule, House Bill 694, this simply requires our motor fuel dealers and wholesalers to file their monthly reports electronically with the Department of Revenue. Current statute requires you to file electronically if you owe $500 or more to the department, but some of our wholesalers move millions of gallons of fuel that is prepaid or tax-free, and so this would require that to be filed electronically as well, so it's easier for the department to verify that they are indeed prepaid or tax-free transfers.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Resolution 158, it's the last one on the list under structured rule. As everybody knows, we have two choices in dedicating certain funds to be used for certain purposes. We can either put it in the Constitution or we can't do anything. We've got statutes out there where we have set up trust funds for solid waste, hazardous waste. We collect monies. We tell the citizens that's what we're going to spend the money on, but there is no requirement that we do that, because under the Constitution, the only way that you can dedicate funds is through the Constitution, not through statute. And that's caused a lot of us some angst over the years. And what this does is it presents a middle ground where, instead of an all or nothing approach that we've got now, this would amend the Constitution to allow us, under certain circumstances, to statutorily dedicate funds to particular purposes. It's got a lot of safeguards in there. For instance, any dedication would expire after 10 years. It would have to be renewed, so each one would have a sunset. It would have to refer to the constitutional amendment. It would have to pass by 2/3 majority in both houses. But under those circumstances, we could dedicate funds like the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, the Solid Waste Trust Fund, the Peace Officers Training Fund. All of those things could be dedicated, and in the event of a financial emergency, by a resolution of both houses, we could suspend it for up to 2 years, and you could do that up to 3 times in any 10-year period. So it gives us a lot of flexibility, but it does allow us to constitutionally, by statute, dedicate funds so that, I mean, if it gets into the Constitution, it's going to be there forever. But if we can do it statutorily, then it gives us the flexibility, but it also gives the teeth that we need in order to be able to prevent the redirection of funds. And so I would submit that this is good legislation, it is good policy, and it would be allow us to do some truth in legislation so that citizens don't feel like they've been subject to bait and switch.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this bill, but citizens certainly feel like they've been baited and switched on these fees. Are there any safeguards? Are there any loopholes in there, with the exception of a state financial crisis? Because if there are, they will be found. Can you tell me, Mr. Chairman?
No, what it does, Representative, is that we can change it, but the only way we can change it is that we have to do it with the same degree of certainty that we did before. In other words, we can amend it if we have 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate and signed by the governor. We can repeal it, but the problem now is that there is a number of ways that funds can be redirected, and a lot of times it's not something that the legislature approves of. For instance, everybody I've talked to said, you know, it's a crying shame that over the last 10 years that there's been almost $100 million of redirected fees from the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. There's been $88 million in redirected fees in the last 10 years from the Solid Waste Trust Fund. The legislature didn't approve that, other than the fact that we vote on the budget. But we aren't going to vote against the budget because of one redirection or something that's a little thing that we don't like. And so what this gives us the opportunity to do is that if there is a move to redirect, it takes 2/3 of us to do it, and we have to specifically vote on it, but somebody else can't redirect.
Any other questions? Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, I was reading the bill on page 1, line 22. That provision there seems to limit the amount that can be dedicated. Am I reading that correctly? And then what's the rationale behind that?
Yeah, there is concern that without that in there, that we would wind up having fewer and fewer discretionary funds. Right now, you know, you look at the budget and you think, gosh, $25 billion, that's a lot of money, and it is. But then when you start looking at, okay, we're committed to this much in Medicaid, and we're committed to this much in education, and we're committed to this much in higher education, you know, it turns out that there's very little that we actually have discretion over as far as what we can appropriate. And this provision is in there so that we don't go crazy over dedicating fees and then reduce further our ability to appropriate in areas that we need to have that discretion. So it limits it to no more than 1% of the amount that was received in the previous fiscal year can be subject to dedication.
That sounds wise, and I guess because it says on line 23, subject to this subparagraph, the fact that the Constitution already dedicates fees doesn't draw in motor fuels tax, for example, to add up to that 1%.
No, because something that's we already have the things that are constitutionally
Right.
dedicated, like the motor fuel tax and the fireworks proceeds. We dedicated trauma and peace officers training fund and some other things. Those would not be included. This would only include in the 1% limitations a statutory dedication pursuant to this constitutional provision.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No more questions. I'm going to go back to Mr. Harrell. I thought that you were going to ask a question on 694, and I would ask if anyone has a question for Mr. Harrell on 694, on the motor fuel filings. No questions. Okay. Mr. Kirby, do you want to present your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologize, had an orientation class of work that employees went a little over with questions on me this morning, but I bring you House Bill 365 today. This is a very simple bill dealing with our sheriffs. What it does is increase the death benefit for the insurance by $10,000. The actuary data, there's no budgeted money needed for this. It would be taken out of the fund that the sheriffs already have in the state to pay for this, and that's really all it does.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. We're gonna set the calendar for tomorrow, Wednesday, the 31st. Under structured, HB 658. Have a move to hear a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under structured, HB 694. Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. It's on. And that's it. Paul Battles.
Paul Battles.